live in 2 minutes. Lynn Cullen live in 1 minute. Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com.
Hey, how you doing? Hello, welcome. It's Friday, the 20-something. 25th? It's the 25th. I have it on good authority. Well, we got some loose ends to tie up. We got some, new stuff. And we have whatever you might be interested in discussing. Feel free to email me. I don't say that enough. At lynn@pghcitypaper.com. Or, of course, you can call at 412. Do you know how bad my eyes are now? I can't even see that. That's where I see the number 316-3381. I'll be danged if I can remember it, so if I can't, I'm going blind. Okay, so, where to start? Big subject yesterday was Wendy Bell. Wendy Bell, the anchor person at WTAE television, is still, as far as I can tell, missing in action. She, I don't think, has been back on the air since this brouhaha caused by her Facebook post, for which she has apologized. However, now the station's apologized. So this is being treated with a lot more seriousness by the station than, frankly, I would expect. But this is a new age, the age of social media. And that is why I think the station realized that they've got to be every bit as indignant about what Wendy said as all the people are who are protesting it, even though probably the folks at the station don't quite understand what the big deal is. That's my guess. However, the president and general manager of WTAE TV, a guy named Charles Wolferts III, they've been through a few since I've decamped, so I don't know this guy at all. He says this, that Wendy displayed an egregious lack of judgment. He says her post offended us. Bullshit. Excuse me. I'm sorry. May I just interject here? You would have read that and not thought anything of it, sir. I don't even know you, but I know TV execs. You were offended only when the public and your audience started to be offended. And then you got right in line. We were offended. Wendy has since apologized for what she wrote and acknowledged it was insensitive. Wendy is sorry for the words she chose, and so are we. It was an egregious lack of judgment. The thing is, the words she chose, it's not the words necessarily she chose. It's her thought, her sensibility that is offensive. And I don't know. The Post-Gazette is suggesting that it was nuanced racism. Somebody actually went on her post when she first posted it, went on her Facebook page and said that what you just wrote was nuanced racism. And she replied to that person before all hell broke loose. Realism, not racism. I don't know if she's got it by now. I suspect she's probably just feeling victimized. But there you have it. So anyway, the Post-Gazette little item on it says that the general manager and president's editorial, which he did on air, apparently yesterday, is available for viewing at the WTAE website. So I went straight for the WTAE website this morning. I can't find it. Big shock, huh? I can't find it. Someone go on and see if you can find it. WTAE.com. They sure aren't highlighting it. I even typed in, they had a search thing. I typed in Wendy Bell editorial. No match found. So I don't know. We'll see how that plays out. And also in the realm of great journalism, and believe me, there is so much great journalism being produced these days. That was the other thing that I have to tell you. Back in my day in television news, the thing that would have gotten you in terrible trouble for writing what she wrote would have nothing to do with race and her condescending, patronizing, white privilege attitude. The crime would have been that she was talking so loosely about a huge news story that was, and a crime that was not yet resolved. That would be so mind-blowingly something you would never, as an anchor person, a journalist, you would never do. And the fact that, at least I don't know, because I wasn't able to access the apology from the general manager. I don't know that he said anything about that. So it's bewildering to those of us who are old school, meaning professional, about our journalistic responsibilities. So that brings us to the National Enquirer. It's not a leap anymore from WTAE News and Wendy Bell to the National Enquirer. And I might add, I happened to be watching, was it ABC Network News last night? Mind-blowing. Mind-blowing, their stories. I've got to start just... I looked in bewilderment at the producer's choice of what stories were to be aired on this measly little half hour for covering national and international news. And it's mind-blowing. First of all, I think they were no more than 6-7 minutes in, and Gary Shandling's death was the... Now, I got to tell you, Gary Shandling, I loved his Larry Sanders show, but he's not you don't... There was a world of news to cover. Gary Shandling obit, and they went from that to a snowstorm in the Middle West and a tornado somewhere. Just a regular, ordinary snowstorm and tornado, but they, full throttle weather report. And then it was to something else. I'm thinking, this is the network news. This is like a bad imitation of a bad local newscast. That's what this is. Mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. Oh, Milton. Milton found it? You found the apology? Well, you're a better surfer than I. Okay. Well, thanks. I can't do anything with it at the moment, but thank you. Okay. So, and speaking of excuse me, I am just going to keep interrupting myself and veering off on the roads not taken. Okay. Eventually, I'll drop crumbs on my way, so maybe I can find my way back to whatever the heck it was I started at. So, the snowstorm. I happened to talk to my mother last night. I said, "So, how you doing, Mom?" And she said, "Oh, I'm so annoyed." I said, "Why?" She says, they scare you half to death." I said, "Who?" "The weather people." I said, "Yeah, that's what they're paid to do now. They weren't paid back in the day for scaring you to death, but they sure as hell are now." And I said, "Yeah, I heard that there's a big snowstorm." They said, "Oh," she said, "there was this thing at the synagogue that was canceled because of them. I got so nervous I canceled my hairdresser appointment. And then you look out the window. It's nothing. It's nothing." I said, "Well, how much snow did you get?" She said, "Well, I don't know. Let me see. It looks, can't be more than 8 inches." And I'm thinking, there's old school too. 8 inches. Puh. She said, "It's nothing you couldn't drive in. I could have gotten my hair cut." Love it. I love it. They used to make Americans stronger, I just want to say. I said, "Mom, it's just another instance of the feminization of the country. It's why people are gravitating to Donald Trump." 8 inches of snow, and people get hysterical. I said, around here, 3 inches of snow will do it. Okay, I got to get back. So, journalism and the tawdry state of it brings us to the National Enquirer. Now, I am not a subscriber. Although, I'll tell you what, I had a friend who was a crack journalist back in the day who went to work for him. Their headquarters at the time, and I don't know if this is true anymore, was somewhere in Florida. And she went to work for him. And when she told me she was working for them, I said, "What?" She said, "I got news for you. First of all, they pay like twice as much as any other. They pay reporters a bundle." And she said, "I find the vetting and the editing and the whole thing, every bit as she said, their stories are, I mean, she told me little things about what they do and, implication and this and that. But she said, I got to tell you, there's some really good journalists working here. And I knew she was. She was a damn good journalist, dogged. And that's what they want. They want dogged, fearless, intrepid. And then, of course, they put bells and whistles on those stories and maybe throw in a piece of innuendo here and there. But apparently, and I haven't seen this issue, National Enquirer is reporting that Ted Cruz is a serial adulterer. And not only that, but they actually have pictures of 5, I believe, women, although they're blurring or blacking out all of them except one, and the one they don't blur out is mind-blowing. Because it says here, an unobscured photo of Donald Trump's spokeswoman, Katrina Pearson, appears in the National Enquirer report, suggesting that she, Donald Trump's spokeswoman, might be one of Ted Cruz's mistresses. I gotta tell you, can't get more unbelievable than that. And then they say, what, because I know your reaction is, what? Come on. Turns out that Ted Cruz's daddy, a noxious man, if there ever was one, named Rafael Cruz, had in the past endorsed Ms. Pearson when she took a shot at running in some Republican primary race in Texas. So there was a connection between her and the father. It says the mistresses include a foxy political consultant, a high-placed Washington, D.C. attorney, even a sex worker. Okay, so I have not...
Yeah.
What?
Well, yeah.
What Celine can't get at, because Celine is over there like starting to, have a little bit of a seizure. She's, what she can't get past is the idea that anyone would sleep with the man. We got a call? No, we don't. Okay, that's okay. So I got to tell you this. Some of you still are of the opinion that if it's written in the National Enquirer, it's just a bunch of crap. May I remind you of some things? The National Enquirer largely led the news. They were so far ahead in front of the national establishment news media on some pretty heavy-duty stories. And I will remind you of a few. The Gary Hart story. They broke that baby, and it totally upended that presidential election. They upended another presidential election with news about the lying, cheating John Edwards. Remember him? Oh, that good-looking, smooth-talking Southern lawyer. Right. Also, I believe they were way out in front on OJ. So, because it's in the... Now, you could say it's nobody's business, but in this campaign, where, again, Ted Cruz is setting himself up as an alternative to the loathsome Trump, just saying. Do not discount this report. My bet is it's largely true. All right, let's see what we got here. You guys are all sending me the editorial. Well, why couldn't I find it? Do I not? Thank you all. Thank you. So I'll look at it later. Okay. So, just saying. And on Twitter, it's a riot to me. Somebody wrote that news reports say that Heidi Cruz has been I forgot what it said. News reports say Heidi Cruz has been chasing Ted Cruz with a frying pan for over an hour in a Wisconsin hotel. Oh, jeez. Well, yeah, you threw your lot in with him, lady. You thought you were depressed before. Let me tell you. Jeez. Okay, so anyway. National Enquirer. They're doing journalism. Here's something else I learned from journalists. Antonio Brown, the Pittsburgh Steeler, who's on Dancing with the Stars, he just bought a house. Not here. He bought a house in Florida. He bought a house for $6.6 million. I'm happy for him. It has 12 bedrooms. What? The thing about 12 bedrooms is that so you mean you got to furnish them all? You got to stick beds in all the bedrooms? And how often are even half of them filled? What is the purpose of having something that large? Except to spur the economy, I suppose. So the funny thing, though, about his $6.6 million house in Hollywood, Florida, is that it not only has 12 bedrooms, it has a synagogue inside it. I guess the former owners were Jewish, and I don't know, they didn't want to, they built their own synagogue in the house. What Antonio Brown's going to do with a synagogue in his house, I don't know, but he has one now. Okay. Ray writes, all right, Ray, all right. It's a 100th anniversary of something. And I never said boo about this supposed 200th anniversary of Pittsburgh, which happened, right? It's the 200th anniversary of Pittsburgh's incorporation as a city, because I swear to God, we'd already celebrated the 250th anniversary. When you celebrate the 250th anniversary and then 50 years later you celebrate the 200th, you got to wonder if you're in some kind of bizarre time warp. But I guess it's 250 years since it was founded, and 200 years since it was legally incorporated as a city. Anyway, but here's another anniversary. It's the 100th anniversary, of the Easter Rebellion. You know what I have to do. The Easter Rebellion, ladies and gentlemen, was what prompted William Butler Yeats to write The Second Coming. Anyway, I'll read. The Easter Rebellion that began the process of Irish freedom fighters throwing off the yoke of English oppression, only to start a civil war amongst themselves. Ain't that the way it so often goes? Anyway, Ray writes, there's a great documentary narrated by Liam Neeson called 1916, The Irish Rebellion. Probably available on demand. And Ray says, have a good Easter. Thank you. You too. So yeah, William Butler Yeats wrote The Second Coming in 1919 in the aftermath of the First World War and the Easter Rebellion. I'm going to do it. Sorry. It's just so apt. Turning and turning in the widening gyre. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed. And everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are those words out when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. A waste of desert sand, a shape with lion's body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun, is moving its slow thighs, while all about it wind shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches toward Bethlehem to be born. Okay. Something surprising. Speaking again of rebellion, everything sort of just goes one thing into the other. Speaking of rebellion and those impassioned people who try to move things, sometimes because they're absolutely right, righteously indignant and righteously passionate, and sometimes because they're stark raving mad. But some people are somehow, by internal force of character, spurred to act in ways that most people are not. To put their lives on the line for something that they perceive as greater than themselves. So today, in my reading, I come upon a piece written by one John McCain, former presidential candidate. And he's writing because he noted, he turns out he reads the New York Times obituary page like I do. He noted the obituary, which I had missed, of a man named Delmer Berg. Delmer Berg, who had died at the age of 100 and who was the last known veteran of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. Now, the Abraham Lincoln Brigade was a group of passionate Americans who went over to put their lives on the line in somebody else's war, not America's, in a country many of them had never been at, in a country that many of them did not know a soul, but they went to fight in Spain. And Spain, of course, was a precursor to World War II. In Spain, you had fascist forces led by Generalissimo Francisco Franco. I'm sorry, I spit on his grave. Generalissimo Francisco Franco. And then the Republicans, I use the word as not meaning, and the Republicans, small r, who wanted a democratically elected government. Franco wanted to bring the king back, but under a fascist thumb. So the commies, a lot of left-wingers went over to fight in the Abraham Lincoln Brigade because they saw that you had to stop these fascists, and they were willing to do that. This is prior to Hitler and Mussolini sending their armies out, but not much. And so these young Americans, there were 3,000 of them, they volunteered. And, of course, Ernest Hemingway was there. Ernest Hemingway wrote For Whom the Bell Tolls about this. And John McCain writes this piece about Delmer Berg, an unapologetic American communist who lived 100 years. And it's an appreciation. And stop and think, as I have vilified John McCain many a time, stop and think of the difference between. This is a man who ran recently for President of the United States, representing the Republican Party. And here he is writing this appreciation for an American communist. Let me read some of what he wrote, just a bit. He tries to explain to people who are reading this what the Lincoln Brigade was, who these people were. And he says many were, including Delmer Berg, communists. Others, though, had just come to fight fascists and defend democracy. Even many of the communists, like Mr. Berg, believed they were freedom fighters, sacrificing life and limb in a country they knew little about for a people they had never met. I have always harbored admiration for their courage and sacrifice in Spain. Mr. Berg, he finishes up, went to Spain when he was a very young man. He fought in some of the biggest and most consequential battles of that war. He sustained wounds. He watched friends die. He knew he had ransomed his life to a lost cause for a people who were strangers to him, but to whom he felt an obligation. And he did not quit on them. Then he came home, started a cement and stonemasonry business, and fought for the things he believed in for the rest of his long life. I don't believe in most of the things that Mr. Berg did except this. I believe, as Dunn wrote, No man is an island entire of itself. He is part of the main, and I believe any man's death diminishes me because I am involved in mankind. So was Mr. Berg. He didn't need to know for whom the bell tolls. He knew it tolled for him, and I salute him. Rest in peace. That was the Republican candidate for president just 8 years ago. And while we're on the subject of Republicans, how weird is it that when this crazy race for the nomination began, Donald Trump didn't have a chance. He was a joke. Jeb Bush was, without a doubt, going to get it. And then he wasn't. And then Marco Rubio was, and then he wasn't. And Scott Walker. Remember him? He was, and then he wasn't. And then we learned, as Trump got more and more ahead of the pack, that Ted Cruz, the most hated man in Washington, was lying in wait. He was waiting to take Trump's voters once Trump tripped and fell. So you'll recall in the early stages of the campaign, Ted Cruz and Donald Trump were palsy-walsy. Cruz waited as Trump organized this big seething mass of enraged white humanity. And waited. And unbelievably, Republicans who couldn't figure which one they hated more are now endorsing a man that they detest. It's fascinating. Lindsey Graham, who famously said, I could murder Ted Cruz on the floor of the Senate and never be convicted. Ted Cruz is now his guy. Jeb Bush now says Ted Cruz is the man to unite the Republic. A person who is detested by every single one of them. Mitt Romney. They're falling in line for Ted Cruz. So freaked are they by Donald Trump. The reality is Ted Cruz is every bit, if not even more so, loathsome and dangerous. But rather than showing courage, fortitude, and refusing to back and aid and abet a man they find repellent, it's beyond belief. I can't remember where that sentence started. So they've decided their last stand. It's the Alamo guys, and it's Ted Cruz. They got to get behind him because there's nobody else. Now I would argue they're wrong. They could have gotten behind Kasich. They really could have. But they're still holding out this fantasy that they can somehow win. You can't win anything. And I'm talking beyond votes. You can't win. You can't save your party by making these deals with the devil. Pick your devil. As Lindsey Graham famously said earlier in the campaign, too. Cruz, Trump, it's like picking poison or, a shotgun in the mouth. I don't remember exactly what he said, but he said they're equally vile. And now he's supporting a guy he fantasized about killing. It's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. So when Jeb Bush announced his endorsement, they've all sullied themselves so it's beyond repair. When Jeb Bush came out and essentially said Cruz is the guy, he said Washington is broken. But then he made absolutely no effort to explain how things in Washington would be repaired or improved by the nomination of a senator whose sole achievement in office was in an effort to shut down the government. A man so loathed by his fellows that, people won't even sit with him at lunch. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So, also in the course of my readings in the last few days, I came upon, and maybe you've seen this, I hoped to get it in yesterday, and then I did not have time, this flashback, mind-blowing report about, I'm going to take you back to Watergate days, take you back to another great Republican president, Richard Nixon. And those of us who lived through that horror, we know the names, we remember them, their faces pop up in front of us. Haldeman, Ehrlichman, all of them. They're all there in our heads. Watching those. I remember, I was living on a pig farm at the time. I remember watching those hearings in a state of absolute terror. I really thought our country was coming apart at the seams. And I really worried that Nixon and his cronies would stage essentially a coup d'etat to stay in power. It was a terrifying time. A true loss of innocence time. Anyway, turns out that one of Nixon's right-hand men, there were really two, Haldeman and Ehrlichman were the biggies. John Ehrlichman, who ended up doing time. They all did. They went to jail. Ehrlichman goes to jail. And not long after he got out, he did an interview that has been sort of forgotten, buried. But it's been now resurrected. And his words are mind-blowing. Harper's Magazine published this story, if you want to get the whole tale. But here's what he said. The Nixon campaign, these are John Ehrlichman's words, the Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that, after 68, had two enemies. That's strange. I thought that enemies list had about 1 million on there, but here he says had two enemies. The anti-war left and black people. Ehrlichman goes on. He's talking to a guy named Dan Baum. This is 22 years ago. Do you understand what I'm saying? He says. We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be, well, either against the war or black. But by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both of them heavily, we could disrupt both those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. Okay, so remember all those black people who told you decades ago that the whole war on drugs thing was just a conspiracy to destroy the black community? You remember that? And how you said, "Oh, now come on, let's not." Conspiracy theories. Here it is. Here it is from the White House. The reason there was a war on drugs was to take down the left and to take down the blacks. And what a fine job they did, especially on the blacks. That war destroyed every urban black community in this country. And continues to do so. I'll say this about Richard Nixon and his guys. They didn't fool around. So there you have it. Wow. And so we have it from the horse's mouth here. That the war on drugs, because that was Nixon's, he launched it. The war on drugs was plainly a political assault designed to help Richard Nixon win and hold the White House and to screw the hell out of the people who would not vote for him. When Nixon proclaimed the war on drugs, he delivered a message to Congress in 1969. And oh my God, if you go back and read that, this war is an effort to respond to the horror of heroin addiction and the rising use of marijuana by our young students. Wow. Ehrlichman died in 1999. His children are saying he never said it. But of course, I guess they're about salvaging the last pieces of whatever legacy he has. The guy he said it to, the reporter, said he had no reason to believe that Ehrlichman was being dishonest, and said he thought it seemed almost as an atonement from a man who had a lot to feel bad about and a lot of regret. And this guy, the reporter, had interviewed him for a book he wrote called Smoke and Mirrors. And he left this out of the book because it didn't fit the style of the book. It didn't ever, in this book, you didn't have all of a sudden a quote from somebody. It was a narrative. And so he didn't see anywhere to put it, and then he just sort of forgot about it. And he said he thought it was sort of like this admission by Ehrlichman is sort of like, veterans of wars who it takes decades and decades, if ever, for them to unburden themselves, perhaps, of a particularly traumatic memory. And he said it obviously took time for Ehrlichman and many others in that circle to come clean. The reporter, Baum, who was on the receiving end of this unbelievable admission, says these guys, they knew they'd done bad things, and they were glad finally, when it was no longer going to cost them anything, to be able to talk about it, to atone for it. Nobody goes into public service, I don't think, on either side of the political aisle to be repressive, to be evil. But then things happen. Okay, so I find that just mind-blowing. Or not. I mean, it sure takes you back to the fear that we felt in those times with Nixon and his henchmen in power and using it in such a cynical, brutal fashion, the results of which we are still struggling with today. Mind-blowing. Speaking of that, as I said, everything's connected. I just keep... speaking of that, and I said something to you about this, the war on drugs has created a country, that'd be us, that incarcerates more of its people than any other country in the world. Incredible, huh? You mean we're worse than Iran? Uh-huh. You mean we're worse than Red China? Uh-huh. Russia? Mm-hmm. All those repressive regimes all over the place? Mm-hmm. We are. 5% of the world's population, 25% of incarcerated people in the world. Right here. The war on drugs largely responsible for this outrage, to which Americans are finally waking up. And I told you about this amazing guy who had been a con himself, who started something called 6068, which is over on the south side there. And what this does is he takes in ex-cons and he teaches them a skill, maybe helps them find a place to live, because what we do with ex-cons is screw them even more. They serve their time for something that shouldn't have been a crime in the first place. They get out. We've taken away their right to vote. Employers won't hire them. And landlords won't rent to them. What the hell are they supposed to do? And now there are efforts to get a lot of these people out of the jails. There are. Right? What are they going to do in our punitive, nasty little society that we created? The one that doesn't believe in second chances? What are they going to do? So here's a guy who's actually doing something, and he's passionate about it. He'll be on the show on Tuesday. Susan agreed to give him her slot. She'll be on Wednesday. But we'll be talking a lot more about this. When this guy was in prison, he was freaked out at the waste of life that he saw there. He said, I was shocked at the waste of humanity and the amount of potential. Okay, so that's something coming up. And there's been another one of those stories going around about the, hypersensitivity on college campuses. This one really is mind-blowing. At first, I thought it was a joke. I read it, and then I thought, somebody just, made this up, right? Is this from The Onion? It wasn't. It wasn't. Have you heard about Emery University? Yeah. Okay. Well, Emery. Apparently, someone took some chalk, I think, and on the sidewalks on campus was writing things like Trump in 16. That's pretty much what it was, I think. Trump. And let's just say that 40 to 50 students marched on the school's administration building in reaction to the chalk Trump on the sidewalk and demanded that whoever did it, I guess, be tarred, feathered, denounced, run out of town, and they all claimed that they felt threatened, that someone amongst them would have done that. It created an environment that made them uncomfortable and fearful. It's called an election, guys. Excuse me? It's called an election. Listen to what they were chanting outside the president's office. You are not listening. Come speak to us. We are in pain. They shoot horses, don't they? I'm sorry, that was a little over the top. However, here's the part of the story that I thought, I can't believe this. Okay, this can't be true. The president of Emery comes out of his office. He stands there and lets these students scream at him for God knows how long because somebody wrote Trump on the sidewalk a few times. And here's what Tony Norman says. No, that's not what Tony says. Forget it. I read that somewhere else. I mean, what would you want the president of Emery to say? We could start with, are you fucking kidding me? What? Get the hell out of my office. Out of you. All of you. I don't want to ever see any of you again. If an investigation is to take place, I'm investigating how the hell we let any of you in. Get the hell out of my office. But that's not what the president did. He capitulated, which is what these guys do all the time. They were offering emergency counseling sessions for those who felt the school had failed them in some way. And in an email to the entire campus, he reiterated his opposition, the school's opposition to bigotry, and promised to find the culprits responsible by reviewing hours of campus surveillance videos. What? I mean, I can't even believe this. Tony Norman says it's a ridiculous capitulation to ignorance. And he said he calls these students, that they're afflicted with a militant strain of know-nothingness. Meanwhile, the American Association of University Professors has finally started to push back. Faculty all over this country are in terror of the students because you say one wrong word and you're called up on charges. You're suspended, you're this, you're that. So these students they're like fucking Maoists. They're like, what the hell? What don't they understand about, number one, freedom of speech? What don't they understand about why you're in school in the first place, you friggin' coddled assholes? I'm sorry. This is beyond belief. There's one story after another. A sociology professor, University of Colorado Boulder, investigated for her class, which had been incredibly popular for over 20 years. But these new students complained that the class was a form of sexual harassment because it involved teaching assistants role-playing pimps and prostitutes in a class that was called Deviance in U.S. Society. That professor, who'd been hugely popular for 20 years, took early retirement. She said, I was so demoralized, I just couldn't do it anymore. And then we got my alma mater, Northwestern University, Laura Kipnis. She was investigated for writing an essay in which she talked about this, what she called sexual paranoia on campus. She actually got investigated by the Department of Justice Title IX's office. And once they investigated, they said, what? There's nothing. What? She was exonerated. And she has written, after I wrote about being brought up on charges, I received dozens of emails from other professors around the country who had been through similar things. It is simply out of control. Indeed. Ah! What's wrong? Somebody wrote Trump on the sidewalk. I've been triggered. I feel scared. Unsafe. Do something. What the hell have we created? Anyway, I'm sorry. I haven't gotten on that in a while, but that's last one. Unbelievable. They wrote Trump on the sidewalk and were marching on the administration building, and incredibly, the administration caves. Mind-blowing. Have a wonderful weekend. Oh, Easter. It's Easter. Have a wonderful Easter. And I'll see you Monday. Toodles.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper, Steel City Media, and its advertisers.